I want to talk a little about people this morning, about this personalities you're going to come across in your life when you pay attention to your surroundings a little bit more. And this kind of starts out with your family. It starts out in our households. Patience begins at home. And we have a phenomenal opportunity to observe tremendous archetypes, to get tremendous insight into the human condition when we observe the things going on under our roofs. And I think a lot of people don't end up studying their families well enough, and then they go out into the world and these archetypes show up and they don't necessarily know how to respond to them as efficiently for their souls, for their situations. My name's Tarab. I make videos about emotional intelligence every day. Today I want to talk about archetypes, elaboration on archetypes. I made a video about this before, but the reason it's very important for us to understand where these archetypes fall in our hierarchy of things that we want to hang out with, spend our time with, and also how deeply ingrained they are in the people that we love and we hold in high esteem. The reason these two things are important is because society is a makeup of a variety of different kind of soulful archetypes. And I'm not going to break down the specifics of them in each video. In fact, after this, I'll probably go and write down in a PDF what I think about archetypes, because I think it's something very, very important for spiritual kind of vision-driven leaders to have a grasp over. But there's a few that I want to talk about, and things that I've seen, things that have crafted my philosophy essentially in the world. So one of them is the control archetype of the victim. The victim. So people that have avoided spending the time to be shameful in life, like genuinely taking into account how their actions affect other people, the depth of their commitment to giving back, and the expectations of that being given to them, meaning their karmic cycle almost is out of whack. Those people will pop up in your life in ways that will make you second guess a lot of the time the things that you are trying to do, second guess the structure of your relationship, meaning will make you feel guilty for doing things that are necessarily good for you because they're saying, oh, poor me all of the time. These people tend to have a facade, at least, of being very loving people. And sometimes they are, and the reality is, all of these archetypes come with this kind of feng shui, this kind of originality, because each human soul is original, necessarily, and unique. But it's akin to essentially a child that will reach out, do the bad thing, and then overly act, in the sense that they are not getting something out of life. They are not, they're not getting the attention they need. They're not getting the toys they need. They're not getting the opportunities they need. All of this, that builds into the adult that eventually ends up blaming everyone else for their issues and not taking the responsibility upon themselves. This is a very important archetype to understand, one that I understand, I would say, quite well, because I see it a lot. The poor me. And the Stoic movement in general, I believe, is trying to break this, because it is a terrible way to live life, frankly speaking. Because if we continue to blame other people and we do not take the blame upon ourselves and instead blame our situations, then a lot of the time, like in my personal life, we won't end up doing the things that we've set out to do. I'll tell you, for a couple of days, I haven't been necessarily making videos as consistently. Obviously, I've been busy. Maybe it's not obvious, but I have been busy. I've had situations that I can use as excuses to not do these things. But at the end of the day, if I don't sit down and do them, then my systems fall apart, and my self-worth falls apart. So this I use as a firm anchor to never allow myself to get into the philosophy that poor me, that things are not turning out the way that I want and it's out of my control. So there's the poor me archetype. Then there is my archetype, which I believe is the protagonist archetype. And I'm vaguely building off the Myers-Briggs test. If you haven't done it before, I'll put a link in the description below. I think it's a very good way to start understanding where we fall in these categories. To start understanding that. There's a lot of stuff that we need to do deeper than just reading a page about generally who we are, obviously. So the protagonist archetype, the things that you'll expect from people like me, are that we are very self-righteous. I believe that when I was younger, though I spent the time to be compassionate and care about other people, I often felt that I was better than other people. I often felt that my philosophies, my understanding of the world is at a higher plane than other people. So you'll come across this kind of this self-righteous attitude to believe that we're better than other people. The other thing is that by virtue of categorizing ourselves as a protagonist, good and evil tend to be things that we think about a lot. And that's probably a decent thing, I think, for most circumstances, because there's a strong self-correcting behavior over time. The protagonist in a story has plenty of things that they need to deal with alone, plenty of things that they need to show other people, and plenty of achievement that they need in their life in order to feel like they deserve living, or that they're utilizing their life energy in the right way. If you want to help build these people up, essentially you just help them reflect on their goals, on the things that they want to do. But this archetype, and psychoanalyzing myself is always difficult, but it comes to mind because I want to be humble when I make these videos. I want to give you true insight, truth as I see it in life. So my archetype has a tendency to expect things, expect larger things from life, expect larger things from people around us. And it's often short-sighted because the largest expectation should be coming from inside. And that probably goes for anything in life. If we don't have that control on the inside, if we don't give ourselves the love that we're looking for in the world, if we don't give ourselves the information that is pertinent to achieving our goals, then we will end up in highly addictive situations where we hedonistically lose ourselves. And it's very easy to do, and it's a very slippery slope, but at the end of the day, it is the contrast sometimes that is required to get the perspective to actually move forward. Convenient excuse, but alas, something that may be necessary in the movement of such a soul. The other thing is we want to be heard. So if we aren't heard, well, probably most protagonists probably are charismatic-ish people, and people that are outspoken, and people that like to be vaguely the center of attention for hopefully good reasons, for hopefully trying to bring more understanding into ourselves, and to eventually hopefully give that back in some sort of way. But I think it's very important for the protagonist to establish a service leadership mindset. For me personally, it gives me a lot of motivation in life to see, my hundreds of YouTube videos that I'm making, my interaction with my family, my interaction with my friends, that hopefully is a positive one. Although sometimes it feels very selfish, and I tell them about this. I mean, I could go in hard, but I don't know how interested you are in me, so I'll go into some other archetypes here. So that's the protagonist. There's the victim. There is an archetype that I've come across a lot that actually pisses me off more than sometimes the victim, is the one that the spiritualists or the mystic. You will come across people in this life that believe that they have a deeper understanding of things because of their mysticism, because of their spirituality, and perhaps they do. But there is often a severe lack of action and accomplishment in the real world, in reality, that is associated with their philosophical ramblings that often tend to be paradoxical and not pointed well enough. I came across some of these people when I sat in on a podcast a while ago, and I still come across these people on Instagram that kind of talk in logical fallacies, essentially, that are rambling so much, and I hope I'm not doing this, but are rambling so much that there is no concise point. There is no conclusion to the thing that they're saying. This archetype also extends into people that don't necessarily have an opinion. So meaning any particular opinion that comes across their way, in order to be likable, they will agree with it. And it will go deeper than the surface level oftentimes. It will actually pervade their soul and make it so that in their personal hours, they do not have the dedication to certain ideologies to actually do anything productive. Now, I personally stay away from the mystic a lot of the time, especially if they don't have real world achievements, because it tends to be unproductive. Very, very unproductive. Because I remember a long time ago, not even that long ago, I'm only like 27, so it's like, you know, relative, but in my teens and my college years, I spent a lot of time having philosophical discussions about life. And I think a lot of us, probably the people watching this channel, have gone through a period of time where everything is interesting to have a question about, and everything deserves our verbiage to it, deserves our direct attention, deserves hours of our time or our thought. And I think it's a very good place to start learning where we stand in the world and the universe. And I think it's very, very important to get our philosophy straight before we get into our careers and into our visions and all of this about life. But I'll tell you that at some point I got fed up with the fact that most of my conversations were turning out to be paradoxes. The conclusion was a paradox rather than a succinct direction to go, or a succinct truth on which to rely on. And I came to realize many years later that this was actually just laziness on my part, that I was willing to leave it completely open instead of deciding how I feel about it, at least temporarily, but as a point to strengthen my views in more substantial conversations. Meaning that if we don't have something that we have said, okay, this is the statement that I am going to start building certain things off of. If we don't have that, we cannot build. I was watching a movie the other day, and it said that for architecture, and maybe this was a joke, but I think it probably is true to some degree, for building in general, it's a good sign when the first day is rainy. And I believe that if we look at this deeply, that philosophical arguments, spiritual arguments about life will always feel like the ground is wet. Will always feel like, should always to a degree feel like, you know, we're in some uncategorized territory, that things are moving around. So it is super, super important for us to build solid foundations in that muck to start with. Otherwise, the entire sculpture or the structure or whatever we're trying to build is just not going to have the longevity that it needs. So these archetypes of this kind of aloof, unopinionated archetype, likability archetype, I personally stay away from. Because oftentimes when these people get to the age of 25, 27, they're just looking for excuses to waste time having these conversations. So we went over 3, the victim. We went over, the protagonist, and we went over the mystic, the spiritualist. Let me see if there's anyone else that I could pinpoint right now, just having thought about it on the top of my head. If you made it this far in the video, smash that like button, throw me a comment on which archetypes you believe I should talk about or that you know of, and subscribe if you haven't already. There is something that I've observed about people that have gone through some sort of trauma in their life in the past, and so become incredibly nihilistic about life. How do I categorize this? This is kind of like a firebrand type of soul. One that seeks to undermine potentially virtuous truths in their life in order to continue hurting themselves, or continue not necessarily, well, staying in the same place, continue staying in the same place, being static in their philosophies of the world. And you've probably met a lot of these people. I think this is one of the easier ones in a philosophical sense to fall into, because it's a lot easier to say to ourselves that things don't matter, and thus our opinion and our evolution doesn't matter, than it is to say that things do matter and that our opinion and evolution do matter. Because the latter gives us a hell lot more responsibility to change ourselves and our circumstances and our philosophies and grow as people, whereas the former essentially gives us an excuse to stay the same. Now, these archetypes often, I remember the conversations that I have with them are often exciting at first, but very shallow. And the reason is because it'll be a night out drinking, it'll be, a situation where there's more than, they generally won't spend time one-on-one with people, because by necessarily they're going to have to start looking at themselves in a deeper, compassionate, spiritual way. There's a deep dark pain in this archetype, and if you are someone that has set out to help people, or if you're an empath particularly and you like to give strength to these people, I would recommend figuring out what that torment was and being very, very careful. Because on the mission of healing, on the mission of recovering these people, you will develop the scars that these people have internalized as well. Meaning that all of these archetypes, we will spend enough time with these if we spend enough time with these archetypes, they become a part of us. And that's just how it is. And a lot of these things are going to end up subtly affecting our worldview. Very, very important to take the time to know, is it worth your time to become this type of person? So the firebrand, the hedonist, the destructive soul, that trauma, it's going to take you a lot to parse out exactly what that trauma is, because the conversations are going to be so difficult to have, because you're going to be building on very, very little every time. These people will often end up destroying their own lives in subtle ways, but have probably the capacity to love deeply because they've been hurt deeply. A lot of food for thought. Hopefully you found this one interesting. If you have some time, check out this video right here where I talked about archetypes before. But I hope these insights help you actualize your potential, Catalyst, because this world needs you. Take care.